Hey, Warrior Saints, Father Chris here. Good morning. Welcome to our Crucifixional live stream. Glad to have you beautiful people with us. You know, the world is exploding today, literally. I mean, we are in the midst of the Palestinian crisis that's still ongoing and all of the chaos that's there. And then, of course, we kind of even put on the back burner the war that's happening in Russia and the Ukraine. And then we worry less and less about things that are happening, like these terrible stories we hear about young girls being kidnapped and raped and tortured in Africa from these militant groups, and just this whole litany of chaos, right? Like it's just all over the place. But today I wanted to talk about not the battles without things that are happening in the world, though they are important and we will continue to address them. I wanted to speak a little bit about winning the war within, because all of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, we all have struggles and challenges, right? Like nobody, I don't think, walks around and says, gee, my life is perfect. It's just nothing ever goes wrong and I don't need to improve or grow or fix anything. I mean, if you're able to say that, good for you. God bless you. But you may be one of one. The rest of us, we all have challenges in our lives. And if you think about the things that you may struggle with, it could be, the challenges of poor relationships, whether with a spouse or a child or with a coworker or, just people in the world, maybe lost a best friend who betrayed you or whatever, estrangement you may have with other people. We may be struggling with physical health. Many of us get sick, and some of it is just a passing cold, but some of it is terminal and leads to fatality. We may be having financial struggles inside, or not inside, where we struggle inside because we can't pay the bills that we need to pay, and work is suffering or business is down. We think about, really, now we start to get inside the inner turmoil, where I feel maybe someone feels not accepted or not affirmed, or somehow that maybe you don't matter to anyone in the world. Maybe you are, feeling alone, and often accompanying that are symptoms of depression, or in today's day and age, where so many people feel anxiety, to where probably the biggest revenue right now is in big pharma, who's making all that medication so that we pop the pills to make us feel better. Then there are those struggles where, look, I'm not giving 100%. I could always do more. I could be better, right? Like I gave an effort to build Project X, but really I could have given X plus 1% or X plus 10% or whatever, because I went soft on it. And then it gets really nasty where, ooh, I'm bad, right? Like where I did a bad thing. I actively, deliberately chose to do something that was completely inappropriate or against the will of God, right? Like then that becomes a real battle inside, where you should be doing X, Y, or Z, but your desire in that base human sinful sense is to do A, B, or C, which you tend to do. And then there's the guilt and the shame that goes with knowing I could have and should have, but I didn't. And finally, that heaviness where somehow I feel like my position with God, and I don't like to speak like that because God is God and we don't like relate, right? But my position with God is not what it's supposed to be. It's not where it should be. I find myself, like our previous example, in the ABCs, not doing the XYZs that God has called me to do, and that, I reject his commandments and for my life and just do my own thing. I'm absorbed in hubris and my own ego and forget him and all that kind of stuff. And if you think about all of that, just that short list of things I just went through, there's war inside, right? And there's war outside in the world, which we know. But we first, I think, must win the war within. We have to find that. We have to make battle inside. None of us will ever be perfect. Perfect is always ahead of us. I don't care what anybody or any theology says. Perfection is unattainable. And that's a good thing, because it gives us something to continually strive towards, right? Like, so we never reach our goal and we can just be done. It's life, man. It's a process where we keep moving and growing, and maybe day after day, as we fight and do this battle within, we take some progress forward. And it may feel slow sometimes. I get that too. But that process of winning the war within, of at least fighting that war within, and then ultimately with an eye on winning it, is something that all of us, especially as warrior saints, have been called to. Like, I don't think God is looking for us to be good, right? According to Jesus, only God is good. He is, however, pushing us to become great, exceptional. People who as warrior saints are on a path to fighting with this stuff that's inside, right? Now look, let me take a quick excursus here as well. The world offers us a multitude of ways to fight and engage to do battle within, right? The world offers us all kinds of ways. You hear it from politicians who give us ideas and their thoughts on how it's supposed to be. Famous athletes or actors or people in the media, influencers who tell us how we are supposed to live. Then we look at all of the stuff on our social media feeds where people are constantly telling us, do this is the way you live life, and so on. And most of it is ultimately devoid of any common sense and truth, but also positive outcome. Most of that stuff leads to even greater and greater misery. So is there a different way? Absolutely, there's a different way. We call it the way of the warrior saint. We believe it. Man, the way of the warrior saint, let me define it like this. It is the way that we should do battle and fight the war within so that we might win that war within. And you're going to ask, all right, Father Chris, great. What does that mean? What is the way of the warrior saint? As you hear us say each and every day, probably definitely until our last breath, that the only way to win that war within, to successfully battle within, is to do it the way that Jesus Christ did it, right? Like all of the rest of the ways that we are being presented or offered or tempted with, suggested that we follow, they don't really work. And like we said, it just adds more misery. And we find ourselves deeper in that darkness and in the depth of that suffering. But if we follow Jesus Christ and live the way he lived, we already have, if you will, proof that his way worked, right? Like Jesus didn't go to death. He definitely went there and died. But I always say he goes through death and the tomb is empty on the other side. You understand? His way didn't find conclusion in the brokenness and the misery of death. Jesus's way conquered it. It went through it into an empty tomb. And the point that the evangelists are telling us is like, hey, you warrior saint, are you looking for a way to win that battle within? Follow Jesus' way. We call that living a crucifixional life, so that we are sacrificing all of our sickness and brokenness and darkness, so that we too might go through death into the proverbial empty tomb. And as Christians, that means in this life and also hopefully in the next, right? Do you understand? That outcome, that product isn't the word I don't want to use, but the outcome, the blessing of living a life on the way of the warrior saint it's an exceptional life. No life is perfect. None of us. But I can tell you this, brothers and sisters, in my own life, that when I stray and follow the ways that the world is presenting to me, I end up in that darkness. But when I dig a little bit deeper and I do what God has commanded me to do, and I live my life crucifixionally, emulating Jesus as best I can, I'm telling you, 10 times out of 10, I know it was right. I know it was the right thing. And something exceptional happens. Perhaps not because of me, maybe in spite of me. But nevertheless, by being on the way of the warrior saint, I could give you 1,001 examples of how it actually works. It's something that really, it is the only thing. It is the only way to win the war within. You have to do battle the way Christ battled. He fought death and won. You can fight your monsters and win. The question is, what way do you do it? I'm challenging you to do it the way of the warrior saint. So we're putting all that together. We're teaching the Bible, and we've built a battle plan for anyone. If you're interested, there it is. You can find it. But I want to encourage all of you. First, recognize that there is a war within that must be fought. Doesn't negate the war outside. That's there, and we'll talk about that for days and days and months to come. But recognize that there's a war within. Number 2, recognize that the world may be offering you a multitude of different ways to conquer it, but they don't work. The only way is the way of the warrior saint. It's the only way that works. And to do that means that we must live crucifixionally. So I'll challenge you to it. Let's get some. We're fighting. We're doing it every day. This day and yesterday and tomorrow if God gives it. Love you, beautiful people. Thanks for being with us. It's been a tough week and probably will be tough again next week with all that's happening out there. But as we struggle to win that war within, we might become men and women who have the ability to actually make a difference in the world. We call those people warrior saints. Join us Sunday morning, 9 and 10 a.m. respectively, Phoenix time for Orthros and Liturgy. And of course, we'll be back next week. Love you. Have a great weekend. And as always, keep walking on the way of the warrior saint.